Yep, I'm ready whenever you are, Marty.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is the time that we have been eagerly awaiting for some months now. I'm Marty Harding. I'm chair of Northwoods and Waters of the St. Croix Heritage Area. We are a group that spans Minnesota and Wisconsin that is seeking national designation for our area as a national heritage area. We have believed firmly since the beginning, which was about 2008, that there are economic benefits. We've been hearing about them for years with the national studies that have been done, but we were not sure what the actual implications might be for our region for national designation. And in January, thanks to the connections that Melanie, who is another of our board members and is on this call this morning, thanks to the connections that she had to the Carlson School of Management, in particular to the Carlson Consulting Enterprise, we were able to sign an agreement that said that they would conduct an economic impact study for our region. We are so grateful for the work that you have done over the last few months and for the contributions from the McKnight Foundation that supported this work. We could not have done this at this moment in our growth. We could not have afforded to have hired you to do the incredible work that you have done. Melanie and I have had the opportunity to work with the Carlson Consulting Enterprise students, whom you will meet in just a moment. And our lives have been greatly enriched as a result. We are going to so miss our weekly calls with you, just personally and professionally, for the incredible accomplishment that you have achieved. You have gone way beyond what our expectations were, and we are so thrilled to bring the results of your study now to a wider group. We will hear the presentation. I'll ask you to hold your questions. At the end, we welcome your questions, because as people who love this area and believe in the mission of Northwoods and Waters of the St. Croix Heritage Area, we're the ones who will carry the information forward. So we need to understand it, we need to believe in it, and we need to be able to defend it in our own words to people who talk to us. Before we begin though, Chris, would you please introduce Liz? Liz is on the call. Liz, welcome.
Yes, I'd be happy. For those who don't know me, I'm Chris Stein. I'm the program coordinator for the National Park Service for National Heritage Areas of the Midwest. Work very closely with Marty and the board. Also joining us are Liz Viemeyer, who is our program coordinator from Washington, D.C., and Susan Teal, who's acting program coordinator from Washington, D.C. So I'm very happy to join them, to welcome them this morning.
We are honored that you are with us and excited to finally meet you on Zoom. We have worked with Liz for, oh gosh, now Liz, how old is your baby? 2 years?
2 years.
Yes. Liz has been our contact. She has been the one who has been working with us on to make sure that what we are saying about our region actually meets the criteria for a national heritage area. And just this year, we received the coveted letter, the Better Homes and Gardens seal of approval, or whatever you want to call it, that says that we meet the criteria for the feasibility study. There's 10 of them that you have to meet, and they're not easy to meet. It's taken us a number of years to be able to actually document what we are doing here, and the fact that we have a place in the national story with stories of our own that must be told. And so just thrilled to have the two of you on. Chris, that's your doing. Thank you for making the connections with us and bringing them to us today. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Vincent Shaw, who is the lead of this entire project. Vince, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marty. I really appreciate that kind introduction. hopefully it meets your expectations. Can everyone see my shared screen? Yep.
Yes.
Yes, but
Oh,
yes,
thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I can only see a few of you. Awesome. Marty Harding, Melanie Kleiss, members and friends of Northwoods and Waters, on behalf of my team and the Carlson Consulting Enterprise, thank you for attending today's presentation. This presentation represents 4 months of dedicated work toward the cause of dedicating a national heritage area within the St. Croix Watershed, and we were honored to help you with this journey, and we hope that this work can be put to good use. So this is our agenda. Our presentation will be organized into 5 sections, starting with our overview, followed by our findings of how NHAs impact communities, how heritage tourism benefits local economies, and then how heritage areas support them. And we'll finish with our recommendations for Northwoods and Waters. The trackers that you can see, little icons on each of these sections, are going to be in the upper right corner of each slide to kind of help you follow along with our organization. So my team and I set out to discover the potential impact of NHA designation to the St. Croix watershed communities. And we addressed this problem by exploring the value NHA designation could bring through through research involving case studies, statistical analysis of economic data, and gathering insights through interviews. So we studied 25 other NHAs and their impact that heritage tourism had on 3 macroeconomic factors within their regions. And that was the gross domestic product, jobs, and personal income. And we conducted interviews with NHA directors and local community members to really get an understanding of what NHA meant for them and what it could possibly mean for the St. Croix watershed. And what we found was the St. Croix watershed possesses abundant cultural, historical, and natural resources for heritage preservation and interpretation that present unrealized potential towards the economic and cultural health of its communities. And we determined that through NHA designation, the St. Croix watershed has the potential to increase yearly tourism by 10% within 5 years. And by tourism, I mean visitors to the region, which in turn has the potential to impact the GDP of the region by 0.3%, which for the St. Croix watershed leads to $7 million in value added to gross domestic product within 2 years of designation. This also impacts job growth by 3.2%, or 1,300 additional jobs within the same time horizon. And lastly, it means a 2.3% growth in personal incomes, or an additional $950 per person in 2 years post NHA designation. So this is the NHA's economic impact at a glance. Really by the numbers look of the impact that I kind of just mentioned, kind of a once over for your viewing. But this is how NHA can impact the economy of the St. Croix watershed communities. With our expected, all these values represent what is expected within 2023. So if NHA designation began in 2021 and 2023, we can expect $7 million in value added to the gross domestic product of the region, which is powered by 700,000 visitors per year, which also in turn increases the jobs in the region by 1,300, and then more money in people's pockets.
So now we're going to be moving on to our next section, heritage areas' impact on the community. To start out, we're going to look at how NHA designation will benefit the St. Croix watershed in specific ways that the community is looking for. This really gets into the heart of what designation means for the watershed. For one, it means the restoration of important natural resources. This is going to be for places like the remnant prairie of Jackson Meadow or the historic Arcola Mills homestead. It also means support for local workers and small businesses. This means that businesses like Taylor Falls City Boat Tours, which is on its 4th generation of owners and operators, can continue its legacy for years to come. Designation is also going to bring greater credibility to the region as a whole. It sort of acts as like a brand image for the region, and it's going to help people make that decision to visit. Targeted experiences for visitors is another benefit of designation. Experiences can be tailored to a wide variety of people, from bird watchers to history nuts to cultural visitors. Finally, designation means that history can be brought to life within the watershed. Due to COVID, people are already longing to get outside, and there are fun historical experiences waiting for them in the watershed. There's things like the canoe and the train museums. These can also act as destinations for schools to take their students on field trips to.
So next, we're going to explain how NHAs typically serve local communities. So we go through 4 different criteria, and I'm sure many of you have heard them before, but it's education, preservation, recreation, economy. Those are just a couple. But this first one here shows that NHA support the historical narratives that unify communities through shared cultural roots. You know, in some of these stories, and I went out and studied several NHAs, these stories would be lost without an NHA designating or sponsoring them. They have abundant outreach programs to local schools. They host local historian conventions and many other educational activities that kind of benefit intangibly the people in the region. And they have the power to take these local city and county histories and kind of put them under one narrative so it's easily understood from outsiders. But these are just some of the examples, and you know, there's many. NHAs also promote visitor experiences for recreational activities. And really what this means is, you know, they are taking the already present local, natural, cultural, and historical resources that are within the region, but they're getting people involved with them in unique ways. And there's some other examples here, like the National Park Service booklets that are very popular for many people that travel national parks, and then, you know, day trips and international trips. NHAs also preserve the local history through a community-driven approach. And I want to highlight here that the preservation that NHAs do are grassroots, community-driven. This isn't something that is done at the national government level. So these are local initiatives and the local people that are benefiting and wishing to see these stories being preserved. And, you know, I just want to do a quick little anecdote of what Motor Cities had done, just to kind of give you an understanding of what this means. But last fall, they dedicated a park to the 1932 Ford Hunger March. And at their ribbon cutting, they had several ancestors or descendants of protesters, some of which who were killed in the Hunger March. So they had the descendants in attendance. They also had the local community leaders, all showing up and work, like, I guess I would say celebrating or honoring what it had done for workers' rights. So it was very a special moment. I talked with the NHA director who has helped kind of fund that through, but it was something she really wanted to highlight, and I thought it was very impactful. And lastly, I'd like to kind of highlight is NHA's improved the local economy through outside visitors and heritage revitalization. So grants fund projects which attract people and businesses to really amplify the resources that are already present within a region. You know, NHAs can also support private enterprise who opt to tell that heritage story. And many NHAs allow private businesses to help tell that story and receive help to be able to do that. And those private enterprises benefit from it. And there's other things like tourist groups that bring visitors to the sites and offer an increased revenue stream for the local businesses. And this economic impact is what my team really set out to discover. So I want to highlight 2 case studies that I thought were very important to kind of give you a real understanding of what these qualitative impacts that NHAs have on their communities. And the first one is about Abraham Lincoln NHA. And Abraham Lincoln NHA is a area within middle Illinois. Represents 43 counties and 28 partner communities. And these partner communities are called Lincoln communities because they have specific stories of Abraham Lincoln's early professional career. And that's the purpose of this NHA, is to kind of tell those stories. And then these partner communities decide what stories are told and what events are marketed. And the NHA kind of uses these local communities to really they highlight their specific events. They call them signature events, and they go to these, they kind of market this little signatures event to these communities perform. And what they have seen is like more and more communities want to be added as a Lincoln community, because they see the benefit. They believe they have a part of the story to tell, and they're desiring to kind of be let into the club, you know, as lack of better words. But it is really the story behind Lincoln's early professional career has been used as a way to bind the communities together under the same cultural story. Next, I wanted to discuss Freedom's Frontier NHA, and they're a little bit different. They're out in Kansas and Missouri border, and their purpose is to tell the story of pre-Civil War, the border battles, and settlement of the frontier. And that consists of about 29 counties in Kansas and 12 in Missouri. But they have over 200 partner sites. So they don't go the community approach, they go the partner site approach. And so these partner sites are half owned privately. So they're private and community owned sites. And, you know, through the power of NHA designation, there's a town called Compton, Kansas, that had about a population of 650 people. It used to be the territorial capital of Kansas, and had a lot of history that was tied with the country spiral in the Civil War. But it also held Lane University, which is the place where Dwight D. Eisenhower's parents met and later got married. But you know, over time, like a lot of other rural small town communities, Lecompton lost a lot of its infrastructure. But NHA designation kind of gave the town a mechanism to tell these incredible stories, and it revitalized its economy. You know, through my conversations with the NHA director, he explains that there's a winery, there's restaurants, courier stores, and the place the economy has been revitalized, and it's been voted one of the 8 wonders of Kansas. So a real big win story for an NHA, kind of showing what impact an NHA could have on a small town.
Great. Thanks so much, Vince. As Vince mentioned, one of the giant drivers of the economic impact that National Heritage Area designation brings is due to increased tourism to the area. And these visitors are really what drives the rest of the things that we'll be talking about, of the different benefits. So we predict that National Heritage Area designation could double visitation to the St. Croix Watershed in just 10 years. We conducted 3 separate analyses of possible tourism scenarios, and our projections showed that visitations may not increase significantly in the first 2 years following NHA designation, but then it will really pick up, and we will see an increase to about 700,000 visitors after 5 years and up to 1.9 visitors after 10 years. Using data from the National Park Service, this would correlate to direct visitor spend in the area of $30 million and $84 million respectively for that 5 and 10 year post NHA designation timeline. So every dollar spent by visitors will have an additional downstream impact in the area that equates to a value that is greater than the initial dollar spent by the visitor. This is shown here as the direct and the secondary effects. Using the National Park Service's data from the St. Croix Riverway, we were able to determine that the St. Croix watershed would have a total economic output of about $42 million 5 years after NHA designation, and it could be as high as $116 million 10 years after NHA designation. Our analyses also found that the St. Croix watershed visitors spend roughly $44 per person per visit. Because each visitor spends roughly $44 per visit, as visitations increase, so will the visitor spending. The food and lodging sectors in the St. Croix watershed will be most positively affected by this growth. It will also, that will translate into the growth of spending. But the recreation, transportation, and retail sectors will also benefit and see increased growth as well.
So now that we've talked about how many people might visit the watershed, let's take a look at why they'd want to visit in the first place. And to do this, we're going to look at a variety of important factors that make the watershed a prime candidate for heritage visitation. First, the National Scenic Riverway and Byway have very similar objectives. This is going to allow them to work together in marketing their historic resources to tell a nationally important heritage story. Also, the Riverway has the unique benefit of being close to the Twin Cities. This means that millions of people are only a short drive away from a day or weekend trip with their family. The watershed also has strong historical significance. They have hundreds of sites on the National Registry that are divided out between those 4 themes. Lastly, heritage towns are great partner sites. The watershed has 18 different counties who each have their own diverse cultural, historical, and natural experiences to offer. Through collaboration of their strengths, a powerful experience can be created for visitors. And to understand how designation can promote these factors, let's look at the range of mechanisms it provides. By speaking with NHA directors and through secondary research, we determined that NHA coordinating entities add value to regions' intrinsic qualities to promote visitation to its cultural sites. And when we apply this to the watershed, it can lead to a substantial increase in visits and spending. So out of the technical assistance, awareness building, networking, seed money for projects, and collaborative marketing, we determined that collaborative marketing was the most valued service coordinating entities could bring. This is because it includes things like brand recognition through the use of the NHA and NPS logo, signage, and a lot of promotional support. In essence, what it does is it takes all those individual efforts of communities and it pulls them all in the same direction so that recognition and credibility can be built.
Now we'll go into the quantitative data side of things and discuss how having this heritage area designation will support the local St. Croix economy. But before we delve into those specific numbers in our findings, we want to first look at some key definitions. And to explain these econ terms, we created this tourism web diagram. This is so that we can understand how the economic contributions that occur from visitor spending supports jobs, income, and business activities in the local economy. And this main slide here is meant to show that tourism economies are really truly complex webs of interacting consumer and producers. So the purchasing decision of a good or service by a visitor on that top can generate a ripple effect throughout an economy like St. Croix. So what is a direct effect of visitor spending? Let's say that a visitor comes to the St. Croix watershed and eats at a local restaurant. The money that he or she spends at said restaurant will go on to directly affect the local St. Croix area's wages, salaries, profit, and taxes. So then what does secondary effects mean? Secondary effects from visitor spending is the sum of both the indirect and induced effect of visitor spending. This is the additional downstream spending that occurs in the local St. Croix area that people maybe don't normally stop to consider. So for example, the activity circle in red on the right shows the indirect activity that are supported by that same initial visitor that goes to that restaurant, right? So that same visitor's spending will go on to support the supplies and services provided to the restaurant, which is the farmers and ranchers that supply the meat and vegetables to that restaurant in St. Croix. As for contributions from related induced activities, which is circled in yellow on the left, that same visitor spent at the same time will go on to support the restaurant's employees themselves because they're using their waitressing income to pay for their own personal bills, goods, and services. So in conclusion, when a visitor visits the soon-to-be established St. Croix NHA and spends their money here at a local business by shopping, going on local tours, and so on, what we really want to highlight is the effects of that will ripple through in so many beneficial ways to the St. Croix community. And the result that we'll be sharing today, when we go into the numbers, will contain both these direct and secondary effects to the local St. Croix economy. So now I'll hand it over to Brendan to go over the details of how the grant money is circulated and how it grows within the local St. Croix economy.
Yeah, thanks, Wen. So the investment of NHA designation interacts with the tourism web that Wen shared with you on the previous slides by magnifying the intrinsic qualities of the watershed over time. So if you will, picture the system you see below without its arrows. This is what you can imagine the tourism web being in this example. We predict that NHA designation will, once injected into this closed system, will make the arrows appear and essentially speed up the cycle of economic growth. With respect to the initial injection in one of NHA designation, we've considered two channels through which designation interacts with the tourism web, as displayed in item 1, a hard monetary channel and a soft reputation channel or signaling channel that's related to collaborative marketing. Both of these investment channels, when injected into this closed system, create a positive feedback loop. The primary impact on the St. Croix area will be experienced in the tourism sector, as Claire has described. As you see in item 2, federal funds are allocated to tourist attractions and visitor numbers should increase as a consequence. This leads to an increased demand and supply of tourist activities. In order to experience these tourist activities, the visitors must interact with the leisure and hospitality businesses within the watershed. They have to interact with restaurants, hotels, grocery stores, gas stations while they're coming to visit to experience the tourist activities in the area. This leads to the direct influence of NHA designation, the company-specific effects. More customers leads to more revenues, which leads to an increased demand for labor to provide these more popular goods and services. So that can be reflected in an increase in jobs in the leisure and hospitality sector. As jobs increase and visitor-related companies see improving profit margins in item 3, we see that in order to meet this increased demand, they have to increase their operating expenditures. And from a supply side, this manifests itself in an increase in revenue in item 4 for non-visitor related businesses, such as insurance companies, consulting firms, farms and ranches. They should also see an increased demand for their products as well to meet the supply side increase in demand. And to meet this, they have to hire more employees and expand their businesses. So broadly, as you see in the macro effects item, the money brought into the community by visitors leads to third, fourth order effects beyond the initial increase in tourism revenue that the visitors are bringing in. This is captured by real GDP increases, community-wide increases in disposable income, and as businesses are more profitable, new startups may form, attracting external monetary injections into the community beyond NHA designation, such as enterprising venture capital investors, for instance. New lines of credit may become available as they see more potential in the St. Croix watershed. And above all else, all of this should equate to an increase in quality of life for the community members within the St. Croix watershed. It's important to note that the cycle does not stop at the macro effects. These general improved observations signal to visitors that the St. Croix watershed is a vibrant and growing community, and tourist numbers may increase as a result of the macro effects. Herein lies the start of another cycle around the positive feedback loop that's introduced by NHA designation. Next slide, Vince.
All right, so finally we get to the numbers that everyone's been waiting for. And here we're gonna start with number of jobs. And to understand the number of jobs that having NHA designation will bring to the St. Croix region, we determined this information by looking at 25 other NHA's data using the Bureau of Labor Statistics database. And we were able to compare 2 different job market scenarios. So scenario 1 is represented as the gray bar on the left. And we show that what job growth would look like in 2 years if the St. Croix region did not have an NHA. The with NHA designation side of things is the yellow bar, which is our scenario number 2 on the right. And we found that having an NHA designation in the St. Croix watershed will create an average of about 6,000 jobs across all industries in the St. Croix region. We also represent this job creation as a range around 5,800 to 7,000 but on average, that's a 2.3% increase in job creation by having an NHA. So now we narrow it down and specifically call out the direct effects of leisure and hospitality related jobs. And we found that having an NHA could create approximately 1,300 heritage tourism jobs in the St. Croix region. And also what I want to point out from this slide is that the top 2 tourism spending sectors that we found and also expected are the lodging and food, and they will account for around 386 and 296 jobs respectively. In other words, about 30% of the overall hospitality jobs will come from visitors staying at hotels or camping in our St. Croix NHA, and 23% of that will come directly from food and beverage consumption, like the restaurant example that I gave earlier.
So yeah, taking a step back on the impact compared to what Wen just shared with you is a broad overall impact on yearly income across all industries for people within the St. Croix watershed, community members within the St. Croix watershed. So as a byproduct of our statistical analysis, we project that St. Croix counties will experience on average an approximate 950 increase in income per person per year across all industries 2 years after designation is achieved. While this may seem very large, this may seem large to, well, not very large. Well, this may seem large to give you a little bit more perspective. If we assume 50-hour work weeks, this equates to a 35-cent increase in hourly wages per person. But over the long run, this is quite substantial increase in income for only 2 years after NHA designation. So this income that we project is in excess of growth that would otherwise be accrued in the NHA excess growth that would have otherwise been accrued in the St. Croix community. On the left, by a similar iterative approach, we see what the level in income would be without NHA designation, and on the right with NHA designation by our analysis. And this equates to a 2.3 increase in income in excess of what it would have been otherwise. And this is conducted using 25 data points of NHA's post-2011 in the Bureau of Labor Statistics data sets. And by an identical statistical process, here we show having NHA area designation brings an average value add of $7 million across all industries to the St. Croix region 2 years after designation. Yeah.
Great. So not only does NHA designation bring value to the communities, it also definitely brings value to the local governments as well. We found through our projections that NHA designation would estimate about 2 years post designation that the income tax would increase by at least $5.4 million, and that corporate tax would increase by about $600,000. Around a 5-year mark, we predict that sales tax will increase by 1.2 million, and this would in total translate to a yearly tax increase of about $7.2 million between that 2 to 5 year time frame following NHA designation.
All right, thank you, Claire. Last, we want to go through the recommendations we have for North Woods and Waters going forward. So these are some of the, I guess, best practices that NHAs have adopted that we think you should maximize in order to really build the benefit that a heritage area could have within the St. Croix watershed. The first is the community engagement piece, which really means allow for partner sites to take ownership of the heritage story for those organic ideas and initiatives to kind of be grassroots driven. There's 2 ways to do it. Like I've kind of showed in our case studies. Yeah, you can have partner sites or partner communities. Both work. The community version usually is best used when the sites, the historical places, are already kind of managed by the government or state. But really what I'm saying is allow sites to interpret the various components of the St. Croix watershed's history while you kind of sit back and provide support. Maybe lean in when you can with certain specific recommendations, but for the most part, let the communities come up with it themselves. Next is collaborative marketing, and there's several approaches you can do. But we suggest you take several approaches to really cross-promote community events, sites, and initiatives. And one thing I like to point out is like the visitor guide. Whether you have it, as a print version or on a website, but ensure that you have specific criteria for what can get added to this guide. And this just ensures quality and credibility to each site. I would say also to benefit or to create the signature events that we've seen in other NHAs, really to highlight certain communities' most important events. And then leverage the NPS logo. National Park logo is well known. And if you can coordinate with the local national park entity to do so, that'd be really helpful for your NHA sites. And lastly is just to be a steward of the story. And what I mean by that is find meaningful ways to promote dialogue to really strengthen the NHA's purpose. There's a good quote I got from a director that was, use money for good and people will follow. Engage with schools to get field trips, engage with to really promote the education, and then engaging with Native American tribes, and do so by compensating for their time, which really means just make them feel like you really desire to have them within the heritage story.
All right, so our next recommendation is that the Northwoods and Waters should be prepared to address commonly expressed community concerns. So some common concerns or questions that we saw are, what is an NHA and what does designation entail? How will designation affect land or property rights? Will the impact only be seen on the federal level or also by citizens and local government? And finally, who oversees the designation and disbursement of funds? So these are questions that we believe are important for you to be thinking about so that you can have a fully informed response to anyone who may ask.
Next, we just want to kind of highlight some of the further actions and research waters moving forward. And the first one is, create a management plan, but that really explains the purpose of Northwoods and Waters, but really defines the steps to become a partner site. It gives that explicit criteria to receive grants. This ensures fairness and ensures there's a level of understanding amongst all the communities, because you're going to have a lot of money coming in, so that could lead to issues if it's not well drawn out. And then explore Minnesota to develop the expertise and capacity to complete a baseline snapshot of regional tourism to fully understand the current state of visitors and spending in the St. Croix region. And that was one of the shortcomings of our study. Was Explore Minnesota uses revenues from the tourist and hospitality industry to get an understanding of what tourism brings to Minnesota, but there's a lack of understanding of how many visitors there are within certain areas. But I think through a national heritage area being designated in Minnesota, you could encourage them to kind of increase the robustness of their ability to get tourism numbers, because other states have done it. Continue to monitor the macroeconomic factors of GDP, jobs, and income within NHA's counties, using the Bureau of Economic Analysis and Bureau of Labor Statistics to really capture that realized economic impact of designation. And it's open source information. It just takes a little bit of understanding of those two websites. But it's something that could easily be done to kind of show the impact that Northwoods and Waters would have within the region. And lastly, try to collect visitor counts through partner sites. Visitor counts is the primary measurement of outside money being brought into an NHA. And at some point, you're going to have to be able to show the economic impact of Northwoods and Waters. So we wanted to finish our presentation with a quote that we got from Walter Mondale, a former vice president, and his spiritual experience with the St. Croix River. And it really represents why our work was important to us, but really how special the St. Croix watershed truly is. So our work has found that by combining economic analysis methods and understanding of what the community feels and NHA is worth, we could estimate the seemingly intangible value that America's protected lands contribute to the sustainability of the economic and cultural health of the St. Croix watershed and the nation. And lastly, thank you for the opportunity to work with you. It was a pleasure, and it's a fantastic learning experience for all of us. So without further ado, I will take this time to answer the questions that